Hey everybody, this is Sandra with Remax Fine Properties.
Okay, only kidding. Hey, it's Sandy Karpen, Remax Fine Properties designated broker. Hey, I wanted to make this video and spend a few minutes and chat a little bit about the email that I sent a few days ago regarding a case study on a Binzer. I've probably had more responses from you guys with that scenario, so I wanted to talk about it just a little bit further. So if you remember, here's what the case study said. The buyer and seller executed an AAR purchase contract. During the inspection period, the buyer provided a Binzer to the seller. In the Binzer, the buyer asked for repairs and a $1,200 credit. The seller said yes to all the repairs but no to the credit. The buyer now wants to cancel the contract. Okay, so the buyer asked for repairs and he asked for a credit. He didn't ask for the credit in lieu of repairs. He asked for two different things. Repairs, and he specified what he wants repaired, and he asked for an additional credit. Seller responds on the Binzer and says, yes, I'll make all the repairs as required. The buyer now, and said no to the credit. The buyer now wants to cancel the contract. The question is, can the buyer cancel? And here's the answer. No. And the reason is this. Prior to expiration of the inspection period, the buyer shall deliver a seller a notice of any items disapproved from the AAR purchase contract. In this case, the buyer may disapprove items and cancel the contract immediately, which he did. However, in this instance, the $1,200 credit was an offer to amend the contract, which the seller did not accept. Therefore, the buyer cannot cancel and recover the earnest money based on the seller declining the buyer's request for a credit. So the problem we have is this, and many of you heard me say this as an example. It's really difficult when we're the listing side to respond to a Binzer that's improperly asked. So in this case, the buyer asked for repairs and he asked for a credit. So in this case, the seller said, I'll make the repairs, but no to the credit. Buyer can cancel the contract, not a problem, he can cancel, but he may not be entitled back to his earnest money because the Binzer is not used to amend the terms of the contract. So the buyer and the seller agreed to the Binzer the way it was designed. The Binzer, again, is designed for the buyer to disapprove items and ask the seller to make repairs. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples and suggestions of what you want to think about. If a Binzer comes back to you and says, buyer requests to make repairs A, B, and C, in lieu of repairs, the buyer would accept a credit of X number of dollars. That's perfectly acceptable, and then the seller can respond accordingly. Okay? Next case. The buyer on the Binzer says, based on the home inspection report, the buyer wants a credit for $1,000. Well, that's an invalid Binzer request, and the reason is the buyer never disapproved an item. You always have to give the seller a chance to make the remedy. So in this case, in lieu of all the items on the home inspection report, he'll take a credit? No, because that's amending the purchase contract. That's not what the Binzer is designed to do. So the seller was not given a chance to make, to make any repairs. So here's a couple of suggestions. If that's given to you, even though it's incorrect, one suggestion might be, if your seller is okay giving that credit, then just give the credit and move on with your transaction. Remember, at the end of the day, the idea is to close the transaction, not necessarily to be right about it. So even though the Binzer was given to us wrong, if the seller would be in agreement with that credit, so again, the example would be, if the buyer says, in lieu of any repairs, but doesn't list the repairs, seller to give buyer credit of $1,000, if the seller is okay with that, then just go with it and move on, because it's not worth fighting the issue.